Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 75 of Fracking Nightmare. And tonight's show is going to be a real stormer because I am absolutely delighted to be joined by my good friends from Queensland, Brian and David Monk. But just before we bring Brian and David into the discussion, of course, a few things have been unfolding here in the UK. And although we are going to finish 2015 frack-free, so that's 3 consecutive years that the UK has managed to remain frack-free. And of course, as we go into 2016, the British government and the industry, despite prices going into the toilet, are still determined to unleash this abomination in this country. Although I'm sure that Brian and David will be enlightening us with some of the experiences that they are still having in Queensland after a decade of this industry being literally in their backyard. Well, of course, the most significant factor of the last week has been the announcement by the British government that the appeal that will be heard following Lancashire's rejection of Quadrilla's application, that the appeal will be heard, but the final decision will be made not by a planning inspector, but by the government. So this was posted in The Guardian last week. Minister, this is Greg Clark, says that he will have the final say on the Lancashire fracking plan. Well, we pretty much know, of course, what that means. But here was the report. It said environmental campaigners have accused ministers of bypassing local democracy after the government said it would have the final say on controversial plans for fracking in Lancashire, whatever the recommendation of a local planning inspector. And the final paragraph on this slide here, in a letter to the council sent on Clark's behalf, the department said the Secretary of State hereby directs that he shall determine these appeals instead of an inspector. Well, let me paraphrase that for you. Basically, it's the British government saying, look, we're going to let this charade continue for a few more weeks just to give you the opportunity to believe that you have some opportunity to participate in the process. But in reality, we're going to call the shots. And you've got a few more weeks to come to terms with it. But we're going to overrule Lancashire County Council. And we're going to give Quadrilla permission to get fracking. I'd love to think I was wrong, but sadly, I don't think that's going to be the case. But of course, this is a classic piece of duplicity, because just 5 months ago, Greg Clark was waxing lyrical about how he was determined to ensure that local communities had the opportunity to participate in the planning process of wind farms. And he said that new planning rules state that local authorities should only grant planning permission for onshore wind farms if the development site is in an area identified as suitable for wind energy development in a local or neighbourhood plan. So total duplicity here. But we did get a result on Thursday, where in East Yorkshire, although Rathlin Energy, yes, that's the same company that is determined to push me into bankruptcy. And we have a hearing date apparently set for Wednesday, 23rd of December. So no accident, obviously, with that date, just 2 days before Christmas. But in East Yorkshire, Rathlin Energy, of course, making an application to go back to West Newton A and drill another well there. Of course, they've claimed that they have no intention of going down into the unconventional geology. It's going to be a shallow well, and they just want to exploit hydrocarbons from the Kirkham Abbey formation. This is the same formation that Third Energy in North Yorkshire extracts the gas for its Knapton power station. Well, what was interesting was that the no fracking clause was introduced after Richard Howarth, a local resident, and John Marger had both presented the council with information that suggested that Rathin Energy were being somewhat less than truthful with their statement that they hadn't fracked at West Newton in the summer. In fact, it's beginning to look more likely that they started to raise the pressure in the well. They lost control of the well almost immediately, which led to them shutting down the well. But they have, funnily enough, say not to divulge the full facts there. Well, it was interesting to see that David Montague's facial expression basically gave the game away, and it seemed that they wanted to get the permission to return there without any restriction, despite their claim that they weren't intending to exploit unconventional hydrocarbons. But anyway, they do have permission to return to West Newton A for 3 years, but with a specific no fracking clause. Now, just earlier this evening, I was forwarded an email that had been written by one of the Lancashire County councillors who had sat in on the planning process, which rejected the quadrilla application earlier this year. And in the email, he's responding to comments from people who have expressed their concerns about the planning inspector not getting the opportunity to take the decision and it being referred back to government. And he said, as stated before, this is not necessarily bad. There will have to be a full public inquiry, which is what everybody wants, isn't it? The inquiry will be no different than if the applicant had appealed, which we expected anyway. We do not belong to a totalitarian state, he writes. The Secretary of State has to obey the rule of law like everyone else, and if she doesn't, her decision and the inspectors can be judicially reviewed. Please do not panic. Well, with all due respect, Councillor, I think that we may be accelerating towards that totalitarian state somewhat faster than perhaps you perceive. Well, meanwhile, we have a very important event on Wednesday in Chester. The Upton Protection Camp was due for eviction as of next Friday, but there was a public meeting, and in fact, I'll be showing some excerpts from my trip to Queensland, more of which later, and we'll also be having input from two people who were recently in Pennsylvania, Joe and Steve White. In fact, they were on the last episode of Fracking Nightmare, sharing their experiences from their recent trip to Pennsylvania. So that's a public meeting. That's at the United Services Club in Crook Street in Chester. Postcode is CH12BE. And of course, this is IGAS. And the whole area there from the Mersey south right through the heart of Chester, of course, licensed to IGAS. Now, anybody watching anywhere in the north of England needs to pay close attention to what my guests have to say. It's becoming very clear that the entire north of England, from the Irish Sea right across to the North Sea, is under attack, under environmental attack from the British government. And who better to give an insight into what people in that area of the country can expect than my guests tonight, Brian and David Monk. So guys, how are you doing out there?
We've been quite warm, but today's quite pleasant at the moment. We're in the mid-20s.
And I really appreciate you joining me, because I know it's not quite stupid o'clock. I know you guys get up early because the sun rises early in Queensland, and of course it's the cooler part of the day. But I think it's about just after 7 o'clock for you guys on Tuesday morning.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah.
And David, for people that have seen Voices from the Gas Fields, they'll be, I think, pleasantly surprised to see you without your sunglasses.
Yeah, no, that's right, Ian. It's not too sunny inside here at the moment, yeah. So this is me.
Au natural, or well, almost. Hey, well, you know, it's exactly 1 year, literally to the day. It's exactly 1 year since I drove away from the Monk Ranch last year, and you guys were wonderfully hospitable, and shared, I think, about 5 days or so with me, taking me around the gas fields of southern Queensland, and of course that resulted in the documentary Voices from the Gas Fields, which has been screened widely around the UK, and I think viewed, according to YouTube, about 18,000 times. So, a year on, what's happened over the past year?
Well, more gas wells, more corruption, more pollution. I don't know, more destruction, just more of the same. They're ramping up the development of all of the compressor stations and the processing plants. This is BG Group, which is now being bought by Shell, or in the process of being bought by Shell. And basically what we're now seeing is the gas fields, which were more gas wells. That's what always makes me laugh about people. They say, hey, look, we've got a 3-year moratorium. And I always say to people, yeah, but it takes them 3 years to drill the gas wells. So a 3-year moratorium on fracking is like nothing, because they don't frack the gas well on day one because their infrastructure is not ready for 3 to 5 years. So, people get lulled into this sense that they've achieved something by getting a moratorium on fracking, when in reality, they've got to drill all the wells, they've got to build all the infrastructure, and then they frack to bring them online. The fracking that you'll be experiencing at the moment, or that they want to do, is really just production testing, Ian. And I don't need to tell you that, you would know it more than what I do. But, this is production. Any fracking that they do now is just to see how effective or how much is going to be required, how much energy. Like, in reality, it requires more energy to drill a gas well than they're ever going to get out of it, probably. It's just insanity.
The other thing we have too is there's I guess a community acceptance of the industry now. So where we went from perhaps being able to stop the industry, now it's just in people's mindset is to contain the industry, not to stop it. Where over where you are, you have the opportunity to stop it, not to contain it, because by the time you get to containment, it's then people prioritise. The majority start to prioritise where it should go because it's already there. And so that's where we're at now is, the broader community just have an acceptance that there will be gas. Now it's just the question where. And, yeah.
And of course,
it's an unfortunate situation.
Yeah. And you have a massive evacuation, really. Like, troublesome people have either been compensated and moved away, people that wanted to go. Other people have been bullied mercilessly and just say, we don't want what's happened to the monks. But if you get in early, you can stop it. You can actually stop it in your community. And that's what you have to do with people power. Forget the governments, because the governments ultimately, if people start to wake up to this fact, the government is working with the corporations. And I'm sure that if you had a look at all of your political parties and all of your government departments, they're probably corporatised now anyway, and not even owned by the British government anyway, not owned, because what they're doing is they're selling privatising everything that could possibly be privatised.
Well, one of the advantages they have of doing that, you see, is once they privatise it, then it's no longer subject to freedom of information requests. So it's only public offices that are subject to or have to respond to FOI requests. So they're able to hide everything, push it to one side. But Brian, David, one of the comments that I get on a fairly regular basis after screening Voices from the Gas Fields is, how come it's only 2 families? How come it's just the Monks and the Jenkins that talk to you? Why didn't other families participate in the production?
I think it's because media is not friendly to those that stand against the corporate interests. So Many people get burnt. I mean, it's a great question to ask, because I have seen, personally, so many people that are now gone. When I drive down our local roads, gates are now wide open because they're corporate owned now, they're industry owned. So they own, I believe it's somewhere around 2% of Queensland now, the gas industry owns. So if you concentrate that down to the gas field region, that's a high proportion of land that they own. So these people are not here to complain anymore. They are gone. That's unfortunate, because the more that once you get into that rolling snowball effect, what's there left to save? So at Wandoan, most of the community is now gone. They've been bought. The shops are now corporate owned. It just, one piece at a time, it just erodes the wall, and I think people assess it now as far as when they do complain. The industry have now changed their tack. The industry are now sorting out issues with people with proximity to infrastructure, gas wells and things like that. And they're just gone. As I said, gates wide open where they were locked. Gates are now wide open, and that's the industry basically.
So basically,
saying,
people are effectively taking the gas company money, because they. I mean, we're going to be talking about one of your neighbours a bit later, who sadly took his own life a few weeks ago. But other people, they're literally they're deciding they had enough, they're taking the money and going. Because, I mean, I remember that when I was with you, there were some people who had indicated that they wanted to participate, they wanted to talk, but they were prevented from doing so because of the confidentiality agreements in the contracts that they had signed with the gas companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you've signed off, you are not going to be doing interviews. You're not going to be talking to people, because the confidentiality clauses, which last for a minimum of 2 years, they are so tight that anyone that speaks they'll take what they can from them. I mean, no one's ever done that, right? No one's ever spoken out once they've signed. I don't think the confidentiality orders would stand up in court, but people believe it. And but Ian, you're missing the fact that a lot of other people have just walked away
without any compensation.
Nothing. Or even worse than that, we've got some friends who, because the family had broken up, and the ex was removed, and basically was removed, but was still on the title. So they hadn't gone through and done the family law court settlement because they didn't have the money to do it. And all that the industry did when the woman said, no, we're not having you on the property anymore, like they were duped in the early days. Remember, everyone was fooled. Everyone up here thought that coal seam gas was conventional natural gas, which is a hole in the ground and out comes the gas. And we were lied to in the early days. That's what we were told it would be. And, oh, no, all we'll do is dig a pipe and put it into the big pipeline to Brisbane. It was nothing but lies. But these people got fooled to have a pipeline on their property, and then the companies come back and they want wells and they want everything else. And so when this person said no, because basically they breach they have an agreement with people and they take no notice of it. So anyway, this woman dug her heels in, her and her new partner dug their heels in, and all that the company did was threatened the ex, because they would have discovered that he was still on the title, and they threatened him with the $50,000 fine of Section 805 of the Act out here. And so he buckled, and that then forced the whole issue to go to family law court, where they found out what was owed on the property, and the family law court ruled that anything above the owed money, the couple the woman and her ex would have to take. And so their property had been valued at 300,000 or 400,000. I can't remember how much now, but it was certainly in excess of 300,000. But when the family law court said, how much do you owe? It was 150,000. So someone had that inside information and offered them $156,000, which meant that this woman and her, how many kids?
Several. But
several kids.
The industry has the resources though, Ian.
Yeah.
Like they have the time where they have access to private information. They can sit there and strategize, a way of looking at each landholder or title holder's scenario. So it might be, family issues. It might be financial issues. It doesn't matter what it is. They have the resources to do that. So we're not talking somebody coming to your gate and a week later, the industry either, presumably attempting to force their way or to walk away. It's not a week, it's not a month, it's not a year. They can have a decade if need be.
They'll wear you down.
To wear people down. And at the end of the day, when you see neighbour by neighbour either signing or selling, it gets to a stage where that it's gotten to a point where you're no longer stopping anything or being able to live with your life the way that you were living it. It's then gotten to the stage where it's just how far will it spread. So, that comes back.
But no, you guys are blessed with 5,500 acres. So, I mean, that's almost the size of a county in this country. So, I mean, and you're living in the heart of that property. So you have got a very significant buffer zone. I mean, if I remember rightly, it's close on 5 kilometres from your front gate to your house.
Absolutely, and that's been a real godsend for us because where people like John Jenkins, they can park in John Jenkins's driveway and shine their lights or their spotlights into his house yard because he hasn't got the buffer. Whereas for us, they pulled lots of interesting game plays down at our gate. And people will ring us up and say, hey, listen, what's QGC all doing down or BG Group doing down at your gate? We don't even know because you can't see our gate, either of our gates. You just can't see them. And so I'm sure they've played lots of games with us and we just haven't even known they were playing. But we've had plenty of other games that, like when they pushed all the timber down over our fence line, 5.5 kilometres of fence, with timber, 60 metres of timber all pushed over the top of the fence. And so I don't know how you would describe a eucalyptus forest in Britain, but in the UK, but they pushed massive trees all over our fence line and left it like that for about 2 years until they tried to, and that was just a game. That was just to manipulate us to talk to them, because David, and I have to say, this is to his credit, he told them no at a very early stage. And when you stop talking to them, what do? They've never taken anyone to land court because they know that they will lose. And when they take you into mediation, I went in, like our legislation will be set up just like yours will be if it isn't already. When they took one of my friends into mediation, and the government mediator sat right beside and took all the minutes of the meeting beside the two BG Group representatives, one of whom was a solicitor that wasn't registered, supposedly, because we're not allowed to take a solicitor with us, supposedly. I mean, I wouldn't go there if I didn't. But, I wouldn't go there with a solicitor anyway. I don't trust them. But... But the point was that they stacked the deck and they did everything, the pressure. The government worker and the two BG Group people just worked mercilessly on this guy for 3 hours. And he's about my age, and he kept on saying, oh, look, I'm too old for this. I need to go home. And they wouldn't let him go. They kept him there. And every time he would even flinch, it even looked like as if he might be going to touch the paper, they would almost leap over the table to get with a pen to get him to sign. And you know the stumbling block, the biggest stumbling block in all of that? He said, I want you to guarantee to me that there is no fraud involved in this matter, that I am aware of all of the implications that could occur, and that there is no contractual agreement between the government or its workers and the company that I should know about. And that was it. As soon as he actually asked for the truth, that was it. And he's never heard from him again.
Well, and people need to know that BG Group is a British company with its headquarters in Reading. And in fact, up until a few months ago, a former Schlumberger chief executive was actually heading it up. Brian, we've got to take a short break. When we come back, we want to talk about the effect on your property, despite your buffer zone, the impact that it's had on your water and on the land and on your ability to use the land to build your livelihood. So don't run away, and we'll be back after this break.
The Alternative View Conference. The AV6 DVD collection. Enjoy 13 fantastic presentations on 12 discs from some of the best researchers in their fields.
What a weekend, hey? What a weekend, what a range of speakers, what a hard bunch of acts to follow, really. I've heard some of the most important information here today, really, because honestly, I've spoken at a lot of gigs, and I'd say this is the best gig that I've spoken at.
These unique presentations are essential viewing for all those who have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and who are now ready to participate in bringing about the changes that we all know we need to see. AV6. 12 discs in 2 volumes. Order now from ukcolumn.org. AV Events, taking positive activism to the next level.
Welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. My guests tonight are Brian and David Monk, speaking to me live from southern Queensland. Now, Brian, David, we've been discussing the fact that you guys are living on 5,500 acres. You've got a very significant buffer zone around you. In fact, much more of a buffer zone than communities in the UK will have if this industry gets a foothold. So what impact has this industry had on you? I mean, let me ask one question first of all. How close is the nearest well to your property?
It's about 2.2 kilometres.
Okay, so that's a little over a mile. In fact, it's about 1.5 miles or so. So it's 1.5 miles to the nearest well. Now, do you believe that they've actually drilled under your property from the border of your property?
No, I don't believe so. I think directional drilling encounters a lot of different problems. In Queensland, Australia in particular, I don't think that they've entertained it too much because they're gaining access relatively easily anyway, and so I think straight down vertical is safer for them. I don't know what will happen in the future, but at this stage, I don't believe so.
Okay, so that's a very important aspect. So the nearest well is about just over 2 kilometres. No drilling under your property. But despite that, what impact has this industry had on your property?
I think the biggest impact that it'll have on everyone's property, or every county even, because if it can affect us, it's certainly going to affect every single person in a county that it's in. I think the scariest thing that we found was that our rainwater tank, now I don't know if you use rainwater tanks in the UK, but our rainwater tank contains radioactive material, cesium-137, which they use in the oil and gas industry. In fact, all of the radon breakdowns. So obviously the pollution's going into the atmosphere, it's raining onto our roofs, and the tank in particular that we got tested out here was off of before the gas industry came, we would have probably just finished building the shed, or maybe we've built it since it started here. But so it's like a new shed roof, new gutter or downpipe, gutter or spouting, whatever you call it in the UK, and new downpipes and new tanks. And basically, they are radioactive. And our health improved when we really did beef up quite a flash RO system to try and get that out.
Reverse osmosis.
Sorry?
Reverse osmosis. Yeah.
But really tiny micron, more than 100 times better than what the gas industry uses. But the scientist that did all of the testing out here, he said, you can't ever have enough filtration on our water. So really what he's saying is that our water's toxic, but it's got all of the breakdowns of radon, all of its daughters and whatever. I don't understand that he did. When he explains it to me, my head spins for a week. But anyway, so obviously it's airborne. Now, the interesting thing is that the Chinchilla, which is a little town near us, it's a town. Its water, the Chinchilla weir, contains polonium-210 and lead-210, which of course is a breakdown from radon. And you start to think of how widespread this is, because that's over 50 kilometres away and probably, I don't know how many kilometres from the nearest production, maybe 15, 20 kilometres away. And their weir has polonium, and that's industry. The industry tested the weir water, and they found that the weir water is radioactive. It's got all the radiums, radon, and polonium, which is a breakdown, as I said.
So where are you getting your water from now? Because you lost your borehole about 7 years ago, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, we can't use the bore. It's toxic, and it burns the skin. I mean, you just can't use it. It changed over, well, maybe not overnight, but over a very short period of time, and then all of a sudden it burnt the kids' skin that was in the water. So you've got to abandon things, and yeah.
Sorry, David,
Anyway,
I interrupted you there. You were going to say?
I was just going to clarify, BG Group actually have permission to pump a minimum of 100 million litres a day into the town of Chinchilla's water supply. So, it impacts for us, of course, losing your bore water. We were very, very small usage of it was just purely for domestic and a little bit of stock. But when you do lose that, of course, you've got all the strain then on your rainwater. Then you find out that your rainwater is in fact contaminated by the industry that's around you. And the scale is hard to comprehend. That's what people really need to know is the scale of just my son is just, it's mind-boggling, you know, and people need to look even where we are and look around us to see that when water, which is especially, we're relatively dry out here, so water just from a health perspective, from a health of your children's perspective, from a state of mind, it solely that alone is a massive impact. That's what people need to put themselves in that situation.
So I mean, obviously the evidence, the physical evidence, is absolutely irrefutable. Meanwhile, of course, the government produces reports such as this one that came out a few weeks ago, the review of the socio-economic impacts of coal seam gas in Queensland. And of course, there is this absolutely outrageous statement in the report. It says, "We made a conscious decision not to meet with local landowners and community groups. These groups have done extensive consultation with gas companies, governments, and with social science researchers, and there was considered to be a very real risk of research fatigue," which of course is a euphemism for people telling us the truth, which we don't want to hear. Instead, the review has relied on the perspectives of the Gasfields Commission and the researchers who have been working very closely with these communities. So I know that you went into apoplexy when you read this report, but now that you've had a chance to digest it, what are your thoughts on this?
Look, that report is almost based exclusively on. Well, if you ask the Coal Seam Gas Commission, one of the members is the chief of the APPEA, which out here is the Australian Petroleum Producers and Exploration Mob, whatever they're, he's one of them. I'm sure he's going to say, oh, look, it's really bad. And then, of course, we've got all the sellouts, the other sellouts, the people that have got gas wells or oil wells or infrastructure all over their properties are all gas field commissioners. Not all of them. There's one or two that can probably claim to be independent or almost independent, but all the rest of them have got a conflict of interest. They should never have been put in the position. But of course they were, because that's how a government manipulates the system.
Well, they stacked the deck.
Yeah.
So it's just logical, so they brought out that report, which was, at this point of the game, I find it comical because unfortunately people put credibility into it. They believe it was actually done, although it says Queensland, it was done by the chief economist, the federal, the Australian government chief economist. So, and it will be used to peddle the propaganda around Australia and used very well, and the UK.
Oh, I'm sure it will be used here to demonstrate that there's all this scaremongering that's going on in all these stories about contamination and negative health effects in Australia, and we've got a report here that says there's nothing to worry about.
The other thing about that comment that he made, where we made a conscious decision not to meet with local landholders, the unfortunate situation will be that the more land that they own, they also can stack the deck that way. So the UK will be seeing reports from Australia which says, it may well be 80% of landholders are satisfied with the coal seam gas industry, but of course that will be 80% them.
Yeah.
So the industry that owns it either directly or indirectly, of course they will be satisfied. And it has a lot of weight because mainstream media has the power to peddle this. So if they see, even if it's a deceitful report or statement, they will run with it. And that's the 30-second news grab that people see, and that's where it gets, its momentum from.
Yeah, and go on. Sorry, Brian, carry on.
Remember we went and we had a look at a high point vent?
Absolutely.
Right.
I can still remember that cotton mouth that I got from there. Yeah.
So anyway, Ian, do you know that the CSIRO, because they're a really big part of that report, the CSIRO, which of course is co-funded by the gas industry, and in fact the department that does the gas is GISERA, and it's heavily funded by all the gas industry, right? But the interesting thing was they inspected 43 gas wells, some of which were decommissioned, 43 gas wells to see how they stacked up against the US for pollution. And they said, remember, these are 43 gas wells that the industry picks, because even a government worker can't go to a gas well without permission of the industry. So the industry picked 43 gas wells to show the CSIRO, out of thousands, they say 6,800, I would say 10 or 11,000 gas wells. And then when I had a bit of an email battle with them after that, and I said, yeah, but did you test any high point vents? No. Did you test any flares? No. Did you test any compressor stations? No. Did you test any ponds? No. What did you test? Well, we tested 40.
We got a free. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, and the CSIRO then said, yeah, but our gas emissions are far less. But that's a lie, because in the US, what we're rating it against is what's actually tested in the atmosphere, not what's tested in 43 gas wells. They needed to test the entire atmosphere.
Yeah.
And and they needed to test all the infrastructure because those few clips that David's done that show that black belching garbage that's coming out of those flares, that's wrong. And the other part of the report that it's built so heavily on is the Queensland Government Health Report, which actually wasn't the Queensland Government Health Report. It was the ERM Health Report, which is a major supporter of the gas and oil industry worldwide, let alone Australia. And not one human, the medical system didn't test one human body. Whereas the doctor out here, Dr. Geraldine McCarran, an absolute legend, anyone that hasn't seen her stuff, they need to have a look at it, because she's actually, all the people that she tested out of the, 20, 30 people that she tested, all but one of them had gas-field chemicals in their body.
And what was her name again, Brian?
Dr. Geraldine McCarran.
Geraldine McCarran.
Yep.
Okay.
Geraldine.
Geraldine McCarran, okay.
But what a lovely lady. And she's done all that independently with no support. Well, that's not true. People have donated money to do the testing because it's thousands of dollars. They gobbled up $13,000 worth of testing overnight almost. But every person, the point is every person showed chemicals, and yet in that Queensland Government Health Report, leader who did the sampling at a time designated by the gas company because they paid for it, found none of the chemicals that were found in people's bodies.
Ian, if I can just go back to the question that you were also saying about the impacts, of the industry on our property.
Yep.
Just to let your viewers, I was on the quad motorbike, so the big four-wheeler, and I was travelling around our boundary with, I think I had one or two of my children with me, and we were stopped by a guy running frantically over to see me. We've got on the other side of my fence line, so on my neighbouring property, we've got the 42-inch high-pressure export pipeline, so it's a scary, scary thing. But we were there, I was travelling through there nice and slow one day, just observing what was going on. A guy ran over to me and he said, you can't be here, and I asked him why, and he said, we're using explosives. The country on this ridge got a little bit tough, and so they were using explosives. Since I've found that neighbouring properties are meant to be informed, because the explosives that they were using could catapult, boulders. His description was boulders like this will fly through the air as they're doing this potentially, and so the risk is really, really high. And so he was quite polite and quite decent, because he was, I guess the word flabbergasted. He couldn't believe that we weren't informed not to be there. This industry, the reason stuff like that occurs is because of the scope, the scale of it. So, it's something where people need to look at that. I'm not saying that in the UK you're going
to be on top of it.
Next to you. It is really like an unregulated, it's a self-regulated industry. Across the world, they claim that. There's no regulation. So even from that small issue, which who knows what could have potentially happened. I mean, we were there just before blast and we were not informed. So I realised my house is a long way from where they were doing that. It may well have been 3.5 kilometres from my home, but certainly, it's been a daily thing for a decade of issues like that.
Well, it's a classic case. I mean, the industry will do the bare minimum. We know that. The world over, it does the bare minimum. I mean, in this country, they trot out the robust regulatory control, but it's nothing more than, to quote you, Brian, it's nothing more than words, because it doesn't actually stack up to anything. I mean, we've got two people in this country who have the breadth and depth of knowledge to be able to regulate this industry, and they can't even monitor what's going on right now. So how the hell they'd ever be able to participate in something of the Queensland scale, goodness only knows. Now, hey, before we take the next break, I do want to draw people to your attention to your YouTube channel, because I am staggered and I mentioned this to you last year when I was out there with you, I am staggered that your YouTube channel doesn't have more views and more subscribers, because I would think that every community in Australia that is faced with this industry should be looking at your YouTube channel. And I know, because we've discussed this, that when we post your videos, David, when we post them around the UK anti-fracking community, then the views ramp up quite significantly. Why is it, do you think, that your YouTube channel isn't getting viewed by communities in Australia?
I think the answer to that is very simple. Look at how the industry is running rampant in Queensland, and inevitably is going to run rampant around Australia. I mean, the answer is in the nature of Australians. Very, very few of us have dug our heels in, and I mean very few. So I think the answer's in itself. Perhaps it's the fact that our brain fluid is bleached by the sun or something like that. I don't know. It's so significant because the way that Australia is set up is we are, our major metropolitans and our capital cities are on the coast, and they are incredibly dependent on, the terminology is the bush, but the farming element. Obviously, that's where they get their food from. So I think in Australia in particular, the ignorance is paramount. It's just I find it hard to even accept this, how simple it is, especially in an island nation like Australia. This isn't rocket science. Our farmers rely on the Great Artesian Basin. They rely on the Condamine alluvium. These are all, groundwater or underwater aquifers. They are finished without it. Finished. They can't sustain it. We may have, 7 months without rain. And that life supply is all that farmers have. And so those farmers are all that our city populations have. Without them, the city populations are finished. So, in answer to your question, I don't know. I think it's just the makeup. I hope that the videos might help the UK.
Well, I hope so too, and I would certainly encourage people, wherever it is that you are, wherever it is, check out the YouTube channel. It's under the name of Brian Monk. There's some outstanding videos there. Now, we're going to take a short break, and in this break, we're going to take a look at an extract from Voices from the Gas Fields. This is a documentary that I produced as a result of my trip out to Australia last year. And this clip has had enormous impact wherever it has been screened around the UK. So I really appreciate you guys. I mean, this was absolutely spontaneous. I don't think either you or I appreciated the significance, perhaps, of what you were saying at the time, but it really comes through in the documentary. But take a look at this.
If at this point in time you can stand in front of a drill rig and stop it from getting on. The easiest drill rig to stop's the first one. The hardest one will be the 10,000. It'll be more than that though in the UK, because you're doing shale over there predominantly. Shale needs a lot of wells, leads a lot of destruction, poisons a lot of water.
If this gets the tiniest foothold, you're done. So it's now or it's never. Don't think that you've got that long, because it's now or never. So you do it now, you stand up now, and you find something within yourself that you didn't think was there. That's the important thing. You will be confronted by police. They wear their Kevlar suits, and it's a big intimidation thing.
Hey, you've got nobody in front of you. Keep walking. You're delaying this lady. Keep going. Don't push back on her. Keep moving. Now. If you've got to keep going. Keep moving.
It's up to the people of the UK to get their cameras in the face of the Kevlar security, the Kevlar police, who are paid by the corporations. And we have to say, no. That's all it is. But it's more than just saying no at a meeting. It's intent. It's the intent of no. It's the knowing that you mean no. That's when you will be unbelievably powerful. You come out in numbers. If they see your grandmother and the mother and the child come out and say, we are not going to accept this, then they are finished. But that's what it takes. Don't sit back and think that anybody's looking out for you. It's you.
And welcome back to part 3 of Fracking Nightmare. And my guests tonight are Brian and David Monk. Now, in the final part of the programme, we're going to talk a little bit about the Link Energy project, which Brian and David refer to as the Link Stink. Now, this is the underground coal gasification project, which is a few kilometres to the west of you guys. How far away is, because at the moment I think there's a 320 kilometre exclusion zone that's been put in place. How far away is that exclusion zone from your ranch?
Well, the exclusion zone's 320 square kilometres, as opposed to a radius of that. So Link's about 12 kilometres, I think, from our home.
So you have had to endure, certainly, I mean, although it's not right under your property, but you've had to endure, I know you called it the Link Stink, the atmospheric impact of this outrageous project where Link Energy effectively just got up and walked away, didn't they?
Well, I haven't sort of walked away yet, but they're certainly sneaking out the back door. He shifted all of his assets over to Singapore, and he's sneaking away. Yeah.
Now, go on.
Go on.
I was going to say, well, you know, it was 12 kilometres or so to the west of you, but one of your neighbours was impacted much more directly, and of course, this is George Bender. And I think there's probably the vast majority of people in the UK who are watching this programme will have heard the name of George Bender, because there was quite a bit of publicity, not in, of course, in the lamestream media, but certainly around the alternative community, and of course very much amongst the anti-fracking community. But this must have hit hard on you guys, because I know that you knew George and his family quite well.
Yeah, we wouldn't say we knew George and his family really well, but we knew him well enough, and the family well enough, to know that George was a very tough, gnarly old farmer, and it really sort of blew our socks off.
But he's had to endure the same pressures as you guys. I mean, what was it that really finally sort of triggered him that he decided to take his own life? Because I mean, obviously he's left behind a distraught family.
Yeah. I mean, it's as I said before, these industries have such big resources that they can go in week after week after week. Where George would have had deadlines, he had to be concerned about the weather. He had I'm not aware of financial situations or anything like that, but most farmers have to worry about the overdraft. They have to worry about their equipment and so forth. These industries don't have to. They just don't have to. So they can come at George. They can come at any other farmer every week of the year for as many years as it takes. And I think that's the difference, where the industry worker gets to go home and fish on the weekend. Those same guys that were pressuring the Bender family the way that they had pressured, me early on, they get to escape from it, whereas George didn't. He didn't get to escape from it. They were doing psyop operations, psychologically dragging him down. They have the resources to do that. They were doing it around his property. So on the other side of his fence lines, they were doing things. How are you meant to sustain that? How can you do that when a guy as strong as George, the only option he had was lights out? I mean, that when coming back to the first question you asked about why there are only 2 families. I mean, that's naive for anyone to ask that when you only have to look a little bit deeper and see the landholders and so forth who are hurting so bad. Their entire life, their future, their children's future, the future of their nation, they can see dissipating. It's gone for them, you know. And to have met George and just to know that he was, you know, one tough bloke. You know, I would question if there was, you know, many as old school as him, and that's what, you know, a decade of the pressure from both UCG and CSG, Origin Energy for CSG. You know, that pressure is just continuous.
And also Link Energy, the bond was, you know, threatening to sue him if he spoke against, you know, if he spread any more of the truth. All George ever did was told the truth about the industry, and Link Energy was virtually next door to him. And the thing that really crushed him at the end was when his pig started to die.
It's you know, it doesn't end, Ian, you know, and for everybody who is watching this, anybody who is watching this, you know, in your situation over there, it is so easy. It is to do the fight of your life for such a short period of time, and you have it done. If you get to the stage where it's in and it's merely a case of containment, then it's over then, and people don't need to worry anymore. So that's what I can stress. It's a life of, it's just torture. It's a daily torture, because whether you hear them, whether you see them, whether you see the flares in your sky at night, whether you smell, you know, we have odours that come through, you know, all these things that just are relentless. You don't get an escape. You know, people in the UK, you will not have an escape if you let them get their grubby little paws in there. And so if it's not worth the fight now, then, you know, basically everybody can shut their mouth after that point.
Well, as you guys, you know, said to me many times when I was out there with you, and it's become a bit of a mantra here. It started with just one well, you know, and as you made the observation, you know, the first rig is the easy one to shut down. You know, it's when you get to 10,000 rigs or 10,000 wells, you know, it's a lot more difficult to stop. You know, guys, you have been absolutely instrumental. I mean, you know, I can't stress enough the importance of the role that you have played in helping to motivate people in this country, to motivate the community groups that we have around the country, which is now well over 400 community groups, all operating completely autonomously and independently. You know, we've learned from other countries. We do not have a national anti-fracking organisation. Every community is encouraged to be, you know, autonomous, independent, and uniquely creative. And you guys have contributed to that enormously. So, I mean, I know it's no consolation because you're having to live with this nightmare and continue to fight this nightmare. But, you know, on behalf of everybody over this side of the world, you know, thank you so much, you know, for your hospitality last year and everything that you continue to do. And, well, you know, I hope that I get the opportunity to get back out and meet with you guys and your families again soon.
No worries, Ian. Be good to see you.
Thanks a lot. Well, we're going to play out with a tribute to George Bender. This is a tribute that was put together by a compatriot of George. And, you know, it's a sad day when somebody feels that they have no further recourse to challenge the corporations, to challenge the growing corporatocracy, which is looking to establish total dominion of this planet, than to take their own life. And obviously that's not something that anyone does lightly. So, you know, hopefully George's death will contribute to bringing this insidious industry to an end. Thanks very much. Thank you, Brian. Thanks, David. My regards to your families, and I'll see you next week.
Queensland Government needs to assist with the cost of the funeral for George Bender. The matter needs to be referred to the Queensland Police. This issue is that George Bender was harassed and berated and hassled that much that he decided the only way to get any relief was to take his own life. I think that needs to be investigated. We spoke about the resources ombudsman. The issue is that people don't have anywhere to go. They don't have anyone to turn to air their grievances or get some decisions made and get some relief from the scourge of CSG mining. A Royal Commission into the human impact. Let's face it, there are a lot of people in and around these coal seam gas wells that are struggling. We need to put a halt to all new projects being approved. I just think that we need to take a deep breath, have the Royal Commission look into the impact of coal seam gas on humans and come to a decision based on that. But the one that I think is most important is just giving the rights back to the people or the landholders. The landholders surely in today's day and age, in the democracy in which we live in, surely should have the right to tell someone whether they can or can't come onto their property and can and cannot mine their property.
Farmer George just lost his life. 10 years of trying to win the fight. They took his rights, destroyed his bores. His every plea was just ignored. A broken will, a broken man, a victim of our resource plan. An honest man with simple needs, destroyed by endless greed. And governments sit on their hands, their words no more than shifting sands. Their promises like George's boars, echoes that are soon ignored. Men in boardrooms shake their heads without a care of why he's dead, while farmers lose their family lands and lose their life by their own hand. Pressures are too hard to bear. Seems the world just doesn't care. Companies will crush your dreams the way they're fracturing their seams. They leave destruction in their wake, tell us it's for profit's sake. Agreements to restore the land are soon forgotten, out of hand. Not just a farm, not just a man, not just a home or a lifelong plan. What's broken on this darkest day, so too was our Australian way. So too was our Australian way. So too was our Australian way. Farmer George just lost his life. 10 years of trying to fight the fight. An honest man with simple needs, destroyed by endless greed. Destroyed by endless greed. Destroyed by endless greed.